My life as an invisible janitor was simple and safe until a man jumped from a moving car, looked me dead in the eye, and whispered a secret name that shattered everything I thought I knew. The squeak of my cart's left wheel was my nightly symphony, a rhythmic complaint against the polished marble floors. 3 a.m. in the atrium of the Sterling Thorn Tower was a lonely time. The only company I had was the city lights, glittering like a fallen constellation through the 3-story glass facade, and the reflection of a tired woman in a gray janitorial uniform. Me. My name is Sarah, and my world was one of ammonia, disinfectant, and the quiet hum of a building breathing in its sleep. I was invisible, a ghost who only appeared after everyone important had gone home, and that's exactly how I liked it. It was simple, predictable, safe. My routine was a prayer whispered against chaos. Mop the lobby, polish the brass fixtures, empty the trash cans filled with the ghosts of multi-million-dollar deal stock reports, crumpled spreadsheets, the occasional takeout container from a restaurant I couldn't afford to walk past. Tonight was no different. I was halfway through the main floor, my bucket of murky water sloshing gently, the squeak of the wheel marking time, like a metronome for the damned. My thoughts were on my mom's medical bills, a mountain that seemed to grow a little taller with every sunrise, and whether the dented can of soup in my locker would be enough for dinner. That's when the headlights cut a sharp, violent slash across the floor. It wasn't unusual to see a late-night car service, but this one was different. A long, impossibly black Mercedes sedan, the kind that looks like it's carved from a block of obsidian, was slowing down right in front of the main doors. It wasn't pulling into the curb. It was just stopping in the middle of the street. I paused, mop in hand, a vague sense of unease prickling my skin. The city wasn't asleep, but this block was. There was no one else around. Then the unthinkable happened. The back passenger door flew open while the car was still rolling at a good 10 miles an hour. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. A figure, silhouetted against the car's plush interior, launched himself out. He didn't step out. He jumped. He hit the asphalt with a sickening thud, tumbling in a chaotic mess of expensive-looking fabric and flailing limbs. He rolled once, twice, and skidded to a stop on the pavement, lying still for a moment that stretched into an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs. My first instinct was to call 911. My hand fumbled for the cheap smartphone in my pocket. The car screeched to a halt a few yards down the road, the driver's door swinging open as a uniformed chauffeur yelled something frantic and unintelligible. But before I could dial, the man on the ground stirred. He pushed himself up, first to his hands and knees, then unsteadily to his feet. He was wearing a suit that, even scuffed with road grit and torn at the elbow, probably cost more than my car. He brushed himself off with a series of sharp, jerky motions, as if he were merely dusting off a bit of lint instead of pavement. He ignored the frantic shouts of his driver completely. And then he turned. His eyes scanned the empty street and locked directly onto the glass facade of the building. Directly onto me. A cold dread, sharp and icy, washed over me. This wasn't a random accident. This was something else. His face was pale in the streetlight, handsome in a severe, chiseled way, but his eyes, they were blazing with an intensity that felt dangerous. He looked like a man who had just set fire to his own world and was running toward the smoke. He started walking toward the entrance, his limp barely noticeable, his gaze never leaving mine. It felt like he was looking straight through the glass, through my uniform, and into my soul. I took a step back, my mop handle suddenly feeling like a pathetic weapon. My mind raced. Was he drunk? High? Insane? I was a lone woman in a massive, empty building in the middle of the night. Every horror story I'd ever heard screamed in my head. He reached the glass doors, pushed one open, and the sterile, quiet air of the lobby was instantly invaded by the smell of the city and the faint, expensive scent of his cologne. He stopped just inside, about 20 feet away from me. The silence was absolute, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the distant wail of a siren that had nothing to do with us. His suit was a mess. A thin trickle of blood ran from a cut on his temple, but he stood there like a king, surveying his domain. He didn't look at the soaring ceilings or the marble floors he undoubtedly owned a piece of. He just looked at me. "Sarah," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly whisper, but it cut through the silence like a razor. My blood ran cold. How did he know my name? My name tag just said staff. Panic seized me, rooting my feet to the floor. He took a slow step forward, then another. He looked from my face down to my chest, and his frantic, wild expression softened for a fraction of a second, replaced by something I couldn't decipher. Recognition? Relief? He raised a hand, his finger trembling slightly as he pointed not at me, but at the cheap, tarnished silver locket I always wore, tucked beneath the collar of my uniform. The one my grandma gave me before she passed, the one I never, ever took off. "I have been looking for you for 20 years, he breathed, his voice cracking with an emotion I couldn't name. "I need you to open that, right now, and tell me the name written on the tiny photograph inside." My fingers, numb and clumsy, flew to my neck, closing protectively around the familiar, cool metal of the locket. My breath hitched. The air in the vast, silent lobby seemed to crackle with tension. 1,000 questions screamed in my mind, but only 2 escaped my lips in a choked whisper. "Who are you? How do you know about this?" The man Thorne, as I'd later learn his name was, of Sterling Thorne Industries itself, took another unsteady step closer. His intense gaze never left the locket my hand was now crushing against my collarbone. "That doesn't matter right now," he rasped, a raw desperation clawing at the edges of his voice. "Please, just open it. Everything my entire life depends on what's inside. I'll give you anything you want. Money?" He saw the flicker in my eyes, the involuntary way my thoughts flew to the stack of final notice bills on my kitchen counter. "Yes, money. Name a price. $1 million. I'll have it in your account before sunrise. I swear on my life. Just tell me the name." $1 million. The number was so absurd, so astronomical, it didn't even sound real. It was a fantasy, a lottery win you dream about but never expect. Yet the way he said it, with the casual desperation of a man for whom $1 million was pocket change, sent a jolt through my fear-frozen limbs. That money could do more than just pay my mom's bills. It could buy her the best doctors, the best care. It could save her life. Just then, the glass doors swung open again. A stout, uniformed chauffeur with a panicked look on his face rushed in. "Mr. Thorne. Sir, are you all right? The authorities are on their way. We have to go." Thorne didn't even turn his head. A low, dangerous growl rumbled in his chest. "Get out, Arthur," he commanded, his voice slicing through the air with an authority that was absolute. "Wait in the car. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. This is more important than anything." The chauffeur, Arthur, froze mid-stride, his mouth agape. He looked from his bleeding, disheveled boss to me, a lowly janitor cowering by her mop bucket, and the confusion on his face was palpable. But he obeyed. Without another word, he backed out of the lobby, the doors hissing shut behind him, plunging us back into a thick, expectant silence. That display of raw power solidified it for me. This wasn't a random madman. This was a man of immense power, a man who had just thrown himself from a moving vehicle because of the cheap piece of silver hanging around my neck. My grandmother had given it to me on her deathbed. "This will keep you safe, Sarah," she'd whispered, her hand frail on mine. Never take it off, never lose it. I never had. My mind was a battlefield. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to scream for help. But the image of my mother, frail and worried in her hospital bed, fought back with ferocious strength. $1 million for a name. It was insane. But what if it was real? With trembling hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, I fumbled with the chain. I lifted the locket from my neck. The clasp was old and stiff. I hadn't opened it in at least a decade. My thumbnail scraped against the silver, trying to find purchase. Thorne watched my every movement, his breath held, his body so tense he looked like he might shatter. Finally, with a soft click, the locket sprang open. Inside, nestled in the worn velvet, was a faded, postage stamp-sized photograph of a baby with wide, curious eyes. My eyes. It was one of the only baby pictures I had of myself, and beneath it, protected by a tiny, yellowed sliver of plastic, was a delicate slip of paper. On it, in my grandmother's elegant, looping cursive, was a single name. A name I hadn't read since I was a child, a name I'd forgotten was even there. It wasn't Sarah. I looked up from the locket into his desperate, waiting eyes. My voice was a dry, cracking whisper. "The name," I said, my throat tight. "It's Anastasia." A strangled gasp ripped from Thorne's throat. He stumbled back as if I had physically struck him, his face a mask of raw, visceral agony. All the frantic energy seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a hollow disbelief. He stared at my face, a deep, searching look that made my skin crawl. Then his gaze dropped back to the open locket in my hand. "No," he choked out, running a bloody hand through his perfect hair, messing it beyond repair. "No, it can't be. The name is right, but the face is wrong." He looked me straight in the eye, and the words he spoke next felt like a wrecking ball, demolishing the entire foundation of my life, of who I thought I was. "Anastasia was my baby sister," he said, his voice breaking. "She was in the car with your parents the night of the crash that killed them. The official report said there were no survivors, but they never found her body." The polished marble floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My parents. The crash. The words echoed in the cavernous silence of the atrium, each one a hammer blow against the carefully constructed walls of my reality. My parents died in a car crash when I was 2. That was the story I'd been told my entire life. My grandmother, their only surviving relative, had raised me. It was a simple, tragic fact, the cornerstone of my identity. But the frantic, desperate man standing before me was rewriting my history with every ragged breath. That's impossible," I stammered, the locket suddenly feeling heavy as lead in my palm. "My name is Sarah. My grandmother gave me this. That's my baby picture." "Is it? Thorne, my brother?" Took a hesitant step forward, his eyes so dark and intense, now filled with a bewildered pain. Or is it Anastasia's picture? The baby they could never find. My father searched for years, spent millions hiring private investigators. They followed every dead end, every false lead. He died believing she was gone forever. After he passed, I took up the search. I'd been hunting for any shred of evidence, any rumor, for 2 decades. Tonight, a source I'd been cultivating for months finally called. He said a woman who worked as a janitor at this very building had been overheard talking about an old locket with a baby picture and a hidden name. He said the name was Anastasia. I thought I'd finally found you." The pieces began to click into place, sharp and painful. My grandmother, always so guarded, so fiercely protective. The way she'd flinch at the mention of my parents' accident, the lack of photos, of mementos. She'd claimed everything was lost in a fire after the crash. Was it all a lie? Why? The question was a raw tear in my throat. Why would she lie? Why would she change my name? I don't know, he said, his voice laced with the same agonizing confusion that was consuming me. Maybe she was scared. My family, my father. He was a powerful and at times a ruthless man. Perhaps she blamed him for the accident. Maybe she was trying to protect you from a world she thought had destroyed your parents. He looked around the empty, opulent lobby. Protect you from all of this. My life as Sarah, the invisible janitor, suddenly felt like a costume I'd been forced to wear for so long I'd mistaken it for my own skin. The mountain of medical bills, the constant struggle, the gnawing feeling that I was meant for something more. It all felt like a cruel joke. Arthur, the chauffeur, reappeared at the door, his face etched with worry. "Sir, the police are a block away." Thorne ignored him. His gaze was locked on mine. "Sarah, Anastasia, whoever you are, I don't care about the name anymore. You have our mother's eyes. I see it now. I've been looking for a ghost for 20 years, but you're real." He closed the remaining distance between us, his movement slow, tentative, as if approaching a frightened animal. He didn't reach for the locket. He reached for me. His hand, warm and steady despite the blood and grime, gently touched my arm. "Come with me," he said softly. "Let's figure this out together. I can help your mother, our grandmother. Whatever she needs, it's done. You never have to squeak a mop cart across this floor again." Tears, hot and unstoppable, streamed down my face. Tears for the life I'd lived, for the parents I never knew, for the grandmother who had lied to protect me, and for the brother who had just jumped out of a moving car to find me. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, a soundtrack to my world being shattered and rebuilt all at once. I looked down at the open locket in my hand, at the face of the baby who was and was not me, at the name that was my birthright. Then I looked up at my brother's face, a face I was seeing for the first time, yet felt like I'd known forever. I snapped the locket shut, the click sealing the past. My hand, the one not holding the locket, reached out and gripped his. His fingers tightened around mine, a lifeline in the swirling chaos of my life. The fear was still there, a trembling deep inside me, but for the first time, it was overshadowed by something else. Hope. A wild, terrifying, and brilliant hope. "Okay," I whispered, my voice finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. "Okay, let's go." As he led me out of the Sterling Thorn Tower and toward the flashing blue and red lights that were no longer a threat but a beacon, I left the mop and bucket standing like a lone sentinel on the marble floor. I was no longer Sarah, the janitor, a ghost in the machine. My name was Anastasia Thorne, and I was walking out of the shadows and into the dawn of a life I was stolen from, a life that was finally mine.